All right, so now we're going to talk about archival authority control. Now, let's identify the learning objectives for this module. Um, we're going to define authority control, authority work, and authority file, and we'll understand why we as information specialists apply authority control, the elements of an archival authority record, differences between archival and library authority records, doing research to support these records, and then how to do authority control of corporate body names, person names, and family names. So, authority control is the process of establishing the preferred form of a heading, such as the proper name or subject for use in a catalog, and ensuring that all catalog records use such headings. The forms of headings, both preferred and variant forms, are defined by a standard. Once established, the forms are recorded in an authority file for future reference to ensure consistency. And this is taken from the SAA dictionary. Some well-known authority files include the Library of Congress Name Authority File, OCLC's WorldCat, the Virtual International Authority File, or VIAF, and SNAC. Authority work is the process of designating preferred names, and in some cases variant names, for entities like corporate bodies, persons, and families, so that catalog users search under one form to ensure consistency. And that said, authority files generally allow for searching by variant names, which will then lead the user to the preferred name for searching. So let's talk about the base required information for an archival authority record. We have core data like the identity, the name, the description, which is a biographical note or an administrative history, and relationship links to both archival resources and to other entities in SNAC. And there's also control data, which is administrative data about the life history of the SNAC record itself. And this is stored in the SNAC audit trail. So at the heart of SNAC's mission is the linking of entities to archival resources and to other entities in context. Here we see Ruth Bader Ginsburg's SNAC record, which highlights some of the requirements of an archival authority record. This is really, in my opinion, just the absolute strength of SNAC and how we can build connections across collections, across institutions. And it's a really great way to see different pieces of a person or an entity in action. So compared with library authority records, archival authority records require additional information about corporate bodies, persons, and families responsible for the creation, assembly, accumulation, and/or maintenance and use of the archival materials being described. DAX, or Describing Archives, a content standard, states that creators of archival materials, as well as the materials themselves, must be described, and the EAC-CPF are included in archival context and for corporate bodies, persons, and families. The structural standard for archival authorities and original structure basis for SNAC allows for additional information not normally found in library authority records. So then let's compare an archival authority record to a library authority record, like the one you would find in the Library of Congress Name Authority file. Okay, so we can talk about establishing or creating a name for a corporate body entity. There's a lot to cover, and corporate bodies have more to consider in some ways. So, as defined by RDA, a corporate body name is a word, character, or group of words or characters by which a corporate body is known. A body is considered to be a corporate body only if it is identified by a particular name and if it acts or may act as a unit. A particular name consists of words that are a specific appellation rather than a general description. Typical examples of corporate bodies are associations, institutions, business firms, nonprofit enterprises, governments, government agencies, projects and programs, religious bodies, local church groups identified by the name of the church, and conferences. Ad hoc events like athletic contests, exhibitions, fairs, And vessels, like ships and spacecraft, are also considered to be corporate bodies. Here I want to take a closer look at some of the components of these corporate body names and break down the components for clarity. Because some corporate body names don't immediately present as corporate, we can use a variety of qualifiers to disambiguate the name. There are many, many combinations of components, and you can consult the cheat sheet that is linked here for more examples. Once you get these slides, these all have links that you can follow, but you see a lot of the same elements repeating here. So here we are back at describing plantations, estates, and farms as corporate bodies in SNAC. So according to the policy that we visited before, the justification for describing plantation names as corporate body entities is that plantations were more than a geographic location. Plantations as corporate entities were more than just the houses or their landmarks, and they were essentially family businesses. Establishing headings for them as corporate bodies recognizes that and does so in such a way as to allow relationships between it and other entities, like those enslaved there, those who enslaved people there, to be demonstrated. I work at an institution with a large number of collections that document slavery, and this has been a real game changer for us in terms of being able to build relationships and especially in terms of the work that we've been doing to identify people who have been enslaved that were not previously mentioned in the description of the collections. As with any type of controlled name, remember to look for patterns. Plantation names are one of these recurring types, generally a name, a type, and a geographical designation. So in terms of determining direct versus indirect naming for corporate body entities, under RDA rules, there are several criteria used to determine whether a corporate body name needs to be established directly or subordinately. The default is to record names in direct order unless the name itself includes a word that implies subordination, such as department of, division of, office of, or committee on, basically a name that is so general that creating it directly would be confusing or not helpful. When determining preferred and variant name forms for corporate body entities, you want to look for those keywords, office of, department of, etc. If the name is something as general as Department of Public Works, it's too general to stand alone and therefore must be established subordinately to a higher corporate entity. A good example of this can be seen here, which is Department of Labor. Without a higher level of organization identified, in this case, a government jurisdiction, the name Department of Labor is too vague to stand alone in the authority file, and so it must be designated as subordinate under a higher body. On the other hand, when a name has no subordinate keywords, it gets established in direct order, as seen in our example of the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library and the National Museum of the American Indian. So starting with the finding aid is a traditional first place to go for a preferred name, and it's also a great place to look for variants. Here is part of the finding aid for the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory records held at the Smithsonian Institute Archives. This is the form used for the preferred form of the name, the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. This name is clear and it doesn't need any additional qualifiers. In the finding aid, the observatory is identified by other names, so these forms become variants, like Smithsonian Institution, Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, and SAO. A general rule for establishing the name of a corporate body entity is to use the name that the corporate body calls itself. When the name is not specific enough, add additional elements to further qualify or describe the entity and to distinguish it from other similarly named entities in the authority file. RDA rules allow one to derive a heading from any biographical or historical source or archival resources with information about the entity. For work in SNAC, editors commonly lift the entity name from a finding aid or other descriptions, but they can establish an entity name based on information found in a variety of sources, like wiki articles, the corporate body's official website, organizational charts, etc. So here we see examples of different resources that could be consulted when establishing a preferred name as well as variants for the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory records. The finding aid describing the records of the entity, Wikipedia, the organization's website, and the Library of Congress name authority file. So generally, when I'm establishing a new entity in SNAC, I like to create my record so that it matches and then builds on the LCNAF authority. I know this is not always possible, either because the authority doesn't exist in the LCNAF, and maybe you're not an eco-librarian or your institution doesn't participate in that. But if possible, I like to ground my work in NACO. So here's another corporate body example. Using this example of the field projects division, we determined that elements of the name of the specific unit of the Getty Conservation Institute imply subordination as it contains the word division. According to RDA rules, we establish field projects division subordinately to the Getty Conservation Institute. So the Record DIM Project Records 1994 to 2009 undated is the finding aid that warrants the new corporate body name, the Getty Conservation Institute Field Projects Division. You can see that's also the creator of this collection, and creator or collector of this collection here. So moving on from a corporate body to a person. So a person is defined as an agent who's an individual human being who lives or is assumed to have lived. So RDA restricts the definition of a person. SNAC further defines persons to include persons named in sacred scriptures, saints, fictitious and legendary persons, and non-human entities like Charlie Brown or Kermit the Frog. Please note the patterns with person names. We usually see surname, comma, forename, comma, date element. In some cases where name forms are vague or underdocumented, there are conventions to qualify names, often including like an occupation or where they were from. So on the topic of trans and gender diverse naming, SNAC follows the guidance of the Trans Metadata Collective's metadata best practices for trans and gender diverse resources. There are a couple parts of note. One, that we want to use culturally and contextually appropriate labels for trans and gender diverse communities and subjects. We want to correctly name and identify trans individuals. And we want to be explicit about transphobia in collections, items, and metadata. We also want to respect the wishes of the author regarding the use of their former names in name authority records. A request from an author to change their NAR is sufficient. You can reach out to the author where possible if you are aware that they have changed their name. If you don't know the author's wishes, follow these principles. Someone's full body of work should be accessible using their current name. Former names that they have previously published under should be used as little as possible and kept private. Former names that the author has not published under should not be included. A person's current name will be the authorized form, and any former names will be, if appropriate, alternative forms. So, like with corporate bodies, we'd start with the finding aid for determining a preferred name for a person. And then we can explore other sources more fully as we are creating the authority record, the Archival authority record for our person, here in this case, Fannie Lou Hamer. We see that Fannie Lou Hamer is, Hamer, comma, Fannie Lou with her dates is established as the preferred name, and SNAC has a policy about preferring the fullest form of the name where possible when it's available. And so because we've established that this is her full name, there isn't a warrant for posting a variant like Hamer, comma, Fannie L period. So you'll find yourself researching your entity throughout the course of your SNAC record create and edit work, and that will involve visiting a variety of web sources. You'll at some point record the sources you visited in order to capture the evidence you found to support the details you've asserted in your SNAC record. And this process is going to make a lot more sense when we discuss sources in depth in the next module. But for now, keep all of your browser tabs open to the sources that you consult along the way. Okay. Now, for our final type of entity, a family. A family is a collective agent who is composed of persons who are related by birth as a family, which can also be understood more broadly beyond just by birth. So, a common question about family names is when there are so many common family names, how do you disambiguate one family from another in the authority file? The common practice is to qualify the family name with a geographic place name reference demonstrated in a lot of the examples here, or we can also use a prominent member of the family to designate that, oh, this is like the McCallum family that is associated with Malcolm McCallum, who was active in those years. So please note the general pattern for family names, which is the surname, the family qualifier, and when warranted, a geographic place designation or the name of the prominent family member. Like other examples that we've discussed, starting with the finding aid is where most SNAC records begin. Unlike notable names, there's nothing for the Eastmans in Wikipedia, and no names in the Library of Congress name authority file, but that's okay. We have patterns to follow when forming the name, and then other sources for individuals' information to help us nail down the heading. Evidence from both the finding aid and from Find a Grave memorials leads us to the heading here on the slide. During our research, we found no evidence to support variant name forms here. We want to just note also that the geographic place qualifier follows the pattern of city or town, comma, state abbreviation that's common in Library of Congress patterned headings. So I know that's a lot. It's really intense. I'm not sure, Jerry introduced himself and me, but I don't know what your backgrounds are. I know that authority work is really it's a lot. It's a lot even for, a lot of librarians and archivists who, I know my archival colleagues, they don't know anything really about MARC or about authority records, and they really glaze over if I'm talking about this at work, if this comes up. So I know it's a lot to take in. This will really make so much more sense once you're creating your records. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. I know, Diane, it's true.
Yeah, this is a great time to pause and go to the group for any questions about what you've seen in modules 1 and 2, especially as Jodi said, that's a lot of information coming out of module 2 especially. So before we go into the actual hands-on create and edit work that starts in module 3 that I'll be leading, I wanted to know if anybody needs anything clarified before we move on.
I don't know that I so much need any clarification on that, but are there any RDA resources that you could send to us, like a primer or something like that, so I have a better sense of the fields that are being used in some of this and the work that we do as part of Indigenized SNAC?
Um, I usually, if you're an RDA user, you're like logging into a paid subscription of the RDA toolkit, but I will do my best to look around and see what we can find. As Jodi was going through the slides there, you noticed blue links at the bottom of several of the slides, and those are links to PDF documents on the SNAC portal. And they contain numerous examples of each type of name, as many possibilities as we could think of. And when I say we, I do have to give a tremendous amount of credit to Dina Herbert. Many of you know Dina. She was my partner in crime for the SNAC team over at National Archives before our program was shut down back in October. So those documents are presented very clearly, and they have RDA contextual notes added to them here and there. And so that'll be a good place to start, but I'm making a note for myself to find like an RDA primer that we can share up to the group.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, give me just a second. I need just a moment to organize my screen.